Confessions of a Lovesick Viking by Emmert's K. Chapter 3. Distractions. You want me to what now? Astrid's mother, Phlegma the Fierce, cocked an eyebrow at the auburn-haired young man holding a small mold in his hand. I just need you to fit your finger inside so I can see if it fits. Hiccup smiled, holding it out to her. Phlegma's look of confusion did not falter. Why? Just taking some measurements. But if you could use your left hand and put in the finger that's third to the left, that'd be great. Yeah, that one. Hiccup smiled as she slowly pushed her finger into the mold. He inwardly whooped for joy. It fit perfectly. Being an individual with a keen eye for detail, he had noticed years ago that one of Astrid and Phlegma's shared traits was their small, slender hands with long, thin fingers. He was taking a risk. If their fingers really didn't match up in size, then the ring wouldn't fit Astrid, it would fit her mother. But this was his best shot in finding out without approaching Astrid again. He prayed to Thor that it would fit. Okay, now you do something for me. Phlegma crossed her arms, bargaining phase on. Hiccup gulped. Astrid so took after her mother. Okay? Oh, don't look so scared. It's really simple. Phlegma smirked at his nervous expression. What's this all about? Hiccup squeaked. He hadn't talked to either of Astrid's parents about his plan yet. He had planned to, of course, but it had only been a few days since he decided to embark on this mission. Unfortunately, that didn't leave him with much time to talk to her parents either. He sighed. Can you keep a secret? From who? Your daughter? That depends. Phlegma smirked wider. I was afraid you'd say that. Hiccup slumped. He decided to beat around the bush, hoping she wouldn't catch on to any deeper meanings. I'm planning a surprise for Astrid's birthday. I just want her to stay surprised, is all. Oh, Phlegma shrugged. Well, yes, fine. I won't say a thing to her. You made it sound like it was something bigger. Well, Hiccup offered a small surprise. It could be. I did say it was a surprise, right? Well, I love surprises, but just make sure you talk to her father about whatever this surprise is. Phlegma warned. Olaf doesn't like to be caught off guard, especially concerning his daughter. Hiccup pursed his lips but nodded. Yeah, I'll talk to him this afternoon, he managed before heading to the door. Thanks for your time. Anytime, dear. Phlegma nodded and turned back to sharpening her axe. He closed the door behind him and stepped off the Hoffersons' porch. He looked toward the harbor, where surely Mr. Hofferson was working. He shook his head and hurried to the forge. He had to get the ring started. If it didn't turn out or set right in the molding, he'd have to make a new one. He would talk to Mr. Hofferson later. Entering the forge, he quickly heated up the fire pit and retrieved the gold. Within the next 20 minutes, it was melted down into a red-hot, bubbly substance. He carefully poured some of it down into the small molding. He then set it aside with tongs to cool and thought about what he should do next. He'd need to attach the diamond to the ring, somehow. He hadn't inspected the diamond ring before to see how it was typically done by southern jewelers. He pulled out his journal and began to sketch of the ring, trying to figure out some way to attach the diamond without it falling off. If it did, there'd be no finding it. It was so engrossed in his sketch that he failed to notice a pair of hands untie his forge apron and retie it to a wooden cart used for carrying tools. Hiccup mused, looking over his drawing. He drew a couple metal prongs at the top of the band. With some hot melding of the gold and prongs he'd have to create from leftover gold, he could hopefully place the diamond on top and then tighten the prongs to hold it in place. He nodded resolutely, hoping this would work. If anything failed, he didn't have an extra diamond like he did the gold. He took a step forward to check on the hardening metal, but a loud clatter and sharp tug at his back caught his attention. What? He jerked around and was surprised by more tugging and more clattering, weapons falling to the floor. A huge sword swung off the cart and very nearly chopped off the toes on his lonely foot. Ah! He yelped, holding out his arms to stay balanced and calm. Whew! He breathed. It would not do to lose his other foot. He finally heard the stifled laughter from nearby. Slapping his arms at his sides, he called, All right, you two, come on, tie me. Tough Nut jumped up and lounged in the shop window. Nah, I don't think I will. The troll might because she's a softie, but I won't. As if you were clumsy enough, this is too much entertainment. Thank you for summing that up. Troll? You're calling it troll? Rough Nut stood beside Hiccup, arms crossed. Hiccup tried to twist and untie himself, but the more he moved, the more weapons clattered to the floor. If it's any consolation, I believe he called you a soft troll. Soft? Rough Nut roared. Oh, I'll show you soft. She launched herself at her brother, running Hiccup over in the process. Ah! Hiccup went flying, as typically klutzy people generally do when body slammed by a soft troll. Even at age 21, some things never change. The crash from inside the forge could be heard down the street, but due to the Thorsten twins rolling in the dirt, beating the crap out of each other, the village remained oblivious to the poor Haddock's plight. Still tied to the cart, Hiccup sat up and sighed. Now he had to clean up the forge of all the weapons. Then he had a thought and smacked his forehead. "Idiots!" he growled, managing to stand up and pull out his dagger from his belt. The twins' heads popped up out of the dirt at his outburst. "Who are you calling an idiot?" Tuff smacked a fist into his palm. "The idiot who could train dragons and forge a ring out of gold, but can't think to cut the stupid apron strings with a knife when he's clearly lying in a battlefield," Hiccup muttered, sawing at the strings of leather and careful not to skewer himself. He'd have to ask Astrid to help him sew those back up. "Oh, yeah!" Tuff jumped back into the forge, Roughnut following close behind. "We heard about the gold! Can I see? Pretty pleased with gooseberries and how to go top?" "Why am I on top?" Hiccup asked as he picked up a couple of spears. "Come on, Hiccup, show us the gold." "Shush!" Hiccup tried to appease them with calming hand motions, but they scowled. "Don't do that, I am not a dragon," Roughnut deadpanned. Toughnut looked down at her. "Really? Your butt says otherwise." He received a punch in the face as recompense. "Oh, yeah." Toughnut sniffed, his left cheek swelling with knuckle marks. "Oh, yeah, that really clears up the sinuses. Thanks, dragon butt." Hiccup rolled his eyes as Ruff yanked on her brother's hair. He had to check on the ring, but he couldn't with these two maniacs around. Besides, he didn't want them blabbing about it, and not just around Astrid. His father didn't want anyone to know about it. But they'd apparently heard it from someone. "Where'd you hear about the gold?" he asked, hating to bring it up when they'd forgotten the topic in their lust for each other's brain. "Gobber," they simultaneously replied, neither looking at him, as they kept hitting each other. He was surprised they actually heard him. "No surprise there," he mused. Hopefully this wouldn't come back to bite him. He glanced outside the forge for someone who could help him lose the twins. He had to keep working before the ring cooled too much in the mold. Finally, he spotted someone. "Fishlegs!" The stocky man turned from his present location and walked to the forge. "What's going on? Everything, okay?" he asked, noticing the bigger red twins. They were hard not to notice. "Sure." Hiccup glanced at them. "I just have a lot of work to do in a short amount of time, and I can't seem to lose them." "Is this about the gold?" Hiccup's face went slack. Strike two. He was now expecting Astrid to walk in and ask about it, but thankfully she was nowhere in sight. Well, not thankfully. He could use a beautiful face right now. "Focus, lover boy!" His subconscious brought him back to reality with the identical maniac still bickering and Fishlegs standing outside the window awkwardly. Hiccup sighed. "Can you do me a huge favor?" Fishlegs sighed and nodded, knowing what was coming. "Sure, I owe you one anyway. First off, can you get these two crud muffins out of my hair? And second, can you distract Astrid? Just do something to keep them all occupied so I can finish my... project?" "Project?" Fishlegs' eyes lit up. "Ugh, Fish! Alright. Fishlegs pouted. "Yeah, I'll take care of them all for you." "Thanks," Hiccup replied gratefully, but frowned. It wasn't fair for him to drop this load on his friend and then not tell him what he was doing, and Fish had really learned the key to keeping a secret since the adventure with the outcasts a few years ago. He sighed. "Alright, come here." He pulled Fishlegs down and quickly whispered to him what he was planning for that coming week. The twins didn't notice a thing until Fishlegs squealed in delight like a little girl. "Oh, really?" The twins whipped around, finally realizing they were missing out on something. What's going on?" Hiccup gave Legs a hard look. "Don't you dare tell a soul!" Fishlegs rolled his eyes. "What? That there is treasure down on the western beach that I found, and that no one can find unless a hideous zippleback digs it out, who happens to have plus 18 digging skills." Hiccup smirked as the twins nearly tripped over themselves, each screeching, "Barf! Belch!" "Fish, I so owe you one." Don't mention it." Fishlegs waved off, walking backwards to try to catch up to the twins. "I am so excited for you!" "Then get to work, I've got you covered." And not a moment too soon, Astrid walked into the clearing a moment later, clearly heading for the forge. Hiccup bit his lip, but Fishlegs easily blocked her path. "Astrid, I need your help." He wailed quite effectively, Hiccup thought, as he watched on from the darkness of the forge. "I went and told the twins that there was treasure on the western beach. They're going to destroy it." "Good thing you didn't say the eastern beach. I'm sure Stoic would kill you." Astrid smirked. The eastern side of the docks. And you need my help because? Because they need to be occupied, or chaperoned, or both. Why? Because they were driving Hiccup crazy. Oh, were they? Astrid glanced to the forge. Hiccup ducked in deeper, hoping she couldn't see him. He didn't think she could, though. She smiled. Well, I suppose I can help keep them in line. Oh, thank you. Fishlegs drawled, legitimately happy that he wouldn't have to face the twins alone. And with Astrid helping, he'd definitely live to see another sunset. Hiccup exhaled his breath in a big whoosh. That was close, he murmured, turning back to the mold. All right, little guy, let's see how you held up. You told them... what exactly? Astrid asked, her blue eyes wide. Fishlegs fidgeted. Well, I may have inexplicably fibbed that there was treasure. Yes, you said that part only 18 times. This beach is out of chaos. There's one dragon and 2 people. How bad could it seriously get? Astrid spread her arms out to the destruction. Gaping holes were all over the beach, some only a few feet deep, some deeper. The deepest, 20 feet deep and long enough to fit an entire dragon, happened to occupy the 2 Thorstons and a furiously digging Zippleback. You guys are idiots, Astrid shook her head. You're just still as you're down here with us, Tough Nut called. We're looking for treasure. I don't need treasures of gold and jewels to keep me happy, Astrid remarked flatly. Fishlegs jerked. He quickly cleared his throat and looked down at the twins sternly. Astrid caught his expression change, but didn't question it. She looked back down at the twins instead. Guys, come on, come back up. These walls are going to cave in, you'll be buried, and how would we get you out exactly? Use your hands, dummy, Rough Nut stated, hands on her hips. The blonde rolled her eyes. Oh yeah, because I could dig like a Zippleback. Who is one of the best dragons for digging, mind you? Fishlegs added. Yeah, bookworm. Tough Nut waved him off. We'll be The sand began to cave in at just that moment. Ah! Astrid yelped, but Fishlegs yanked her back, and they scampered away from the edge. Barf and Bulge grabbed the twins and threw them into the air far away from the caving-in sand pit. They landed in the shallows of the ocean nearby with a resounding splash. The dragon tried to flap out of the hole, but it couldn't get out in time. However, there was nothing to fear because its necks stretched over the original hole. The creature's 2 heads stuck up a few feet out of the sand, but that was it. Barf and Belch were surely and undeniably stuck. Astrid sighed. Well, you guys got what you wanted. If you truly love this dragon, you'll be digging up a treasure far better than gold. Ruff and Duff splashed over and immediately started dragging sand by the handful away from the dragon's necks. They argued over whose fault this all was anyway, while Fishlegs sighed heavily. This is going to be a long day. Who knew this gadget could really come in handy one day? Hiccup mused, hoping no one would walk into his back workroom at that moment. He tied a few of his spying glasses together by a leather strap which was tied to the back of his head. The end result was magnifying glasses, only they were huge and extended several inches off his face, making him look seriously goofy. If anyone was to walk in and he looked up, he was sure they'd die of laughter. His big green eyes were probably monstrous right now through the front view. But he had no other option. He'd successfully created the prongs to hold the diamond, so now he was trying to fit it on the band. But the spaces were too small, so he'd been forced to bring out the gadget that he figured he'd never end up using. Setting the diamond on top of the prongs with tweezers, he managed to set the diamond on top and press it down. Now he'd need to tighten the prongs and hope the gem wouldn't pop off and fly to the floor. It was a good thing he had steady hands. Another 5 minutes and he was done, yanking the contraption off his face and rubbing his eyes. He held up the finalized product and sighed heavily, happy to be done. Wow, he smiled. To this day, his biggest invention was by far Toothless's tail and rigging. But this? The golden band was thin and light, yet it still shone like the day he found it. The diamond set on top was gorgeous, like the moment he chose it out of the box of jewels. But together? Now I really don't care what anyone says, he told himself, setting it inside a small box and shoving it into a corner of his desk. But I am the man! He leaned back and stretched, wondering what time it was. It had to be mid-afternoon. His stomach grumbled at the thought. He hadn't eaten since early that morning before flying with Toothless. He walked out of the forge and nearly fell over. The sunset was unmistakable. It had to be nearly 6 in the afternoon. So we really hadn't eaten for about 12 hours ago. Oh boy, he mused, heading toward the docks. He hoped Mr. Hofferson was still there. He wouldn't talk to him at their home. He didn't want to risk Astrid overhearing. Anyway, he'd hopefully talk to him and then head home for the night. All that forge work on the ring was taxing. Luck was in his favor, and he saw Olaf Hofferson walking up the docks with some other men, clearly done working for the day. Hiccup stood at the top, waiting for him to arrive, but he was suddenly panic-stricken. What do I say? Hello, Mr. Hofferson, sir. I'd like to ask for your daughter's hand. No, that's too formal. I want to marry Astrid. What do you say? Oh, Thor's beard. Hiccup, way too casual. Hiccup argued with himself mentally. Olaf was nearing the top now. What do I say? What do I say? Luck was again in his favor when Olaf slapped his shoulder and boomed, Hello, Hiccup. Ah, hi. Hiccup squeaked, then cleared his throat. Hi. He tried again, in a deeper voice, clearly flustered. I've been meaning to speak to you, Olaf said, turning to walk towards the cliff nearby so that they wouldn't be overheard. Hiccup gulped. Really? What about? Once a good distance away, the tall, stocky blonde turned back to him. My daughter, what are your intentions with her? Hiccup blinked, trying to catch his meaning. Like, does he mean in general, or more than that? He took a deep breath and said, Well, I was actually coming to talk to you about her. I was going to ask you... Here we go. He stopped fidgeting, stood taller, and looked the man in the eye. I would like to marry her, with your permission, sir. Olaf's face was blank for a moment as he stared back at him. Hiccup grew nervous, but he forced himself to hold still and keep his gaze neutral. Okay, maybe a tad bit hopeful? Maybe more? Olaf finally drew in a deep breath. I mean, no offense, he began slowly. And here we go, Hiccup thought, fearing the worst. But, though you have grown stronger and a wee bit taller, how are you going to protect her? You're still not cut out to be a Viking warrior, which you have to be to protect the family. A few sarcastic comments came to mind, but Hiccup silenced them. He instead nodded. I understand that I'm not normal by any stretch of the imagination. I'm small, I'm strong for a super average person, but only because I have to build muscle on a regular basis, not because it's in my genes. I'm not great with weapons. He tapered off, but looked the man in the eye again. But I love your daughter. I'll protect her with every fiber of my being. I won't let her starve or freeze in the cold of winter. I'll be there for her every day until I die. The corner of Olaf's mouth twitched into a slight smile, but he said nothing. Hiccup quietly added with a shrug, and she'd be the mother of the next chief. Not a bad addition. Olaf had to smile at that, but he said, Why are you choosing her? We all know you'll be chief one day, and that you'll need a wife. Why, Astrid? Hiccup thought for a moment, and then replied, When I was a little kid, I thought she was the most beautiful person on the island. That thought has never faltered over the years, but that's not all. She's strong physically and emotionally. She's a proper leader. People and dragons listen to her. She's got a handle on her responsibilities. But she was also the first person that became my friend. She's not just the girl that I've had puppy eyes for since we were 5. She's the girl who became my best friend. Even if we didn't get married, I would do anything for her because I owe so much to her. Other than Toothless, she helped mold me into what I am today. He paused and then lightly shrugged. That's why, Astrid. Olaf seemed transfixed, like he could listen to Hiccup express his love for his only daughter all night, but he cleared his throat and shook his head. Hiccup pursed his lips. Are pounding. Olaf smirked. I'll give you my blessing. Hiccup nearly squeaked in delight, but Olaf laid a hand on her shoulder and held up a single finger. But. The young man paused, biting his lip. But you need to prove to me that you can handle a weapon. It'll be good and quite important for you to know how to properly use one. I'm actually pretty decent with a sword, if I may generously remind you. Yes, but something sturdier than that. Olaf raised an eyebrow. You are good with that, but if you don't have a sword enough to fight, you will need to know how to use it. So, Hiccup swallowed, you want me to prove to you that I can learn how to properly use any weapon that is not a sword before proposing to Astrid? Gosh. Olaf nodded firmly. Hiccup sighed, but stuck his hand out with a smile. Done. Done. Thank you, sir. Olaf gave him a thump on the back before walking toward the village, leaving Hiccup standing by the cliff edge. He'd have to learn how to legitimately use a weapon, and very soon. And something told him that a dagger didn't count. A grin suddenly jumped to his face, and he jumped for joy with a fist in the air. Whoa! Careful! Wouldn't want to lose you over the cliff. Hiccup jerked to a stop and tried to appear composed as Astrid walked toward him. Yeah, that wouldn't be, good. Astrid giggled and stood in front of him, looking up into his green eyes, which gave off a slightly mystical look in contrast to the red sunset behind him. What have you been doing all day? He shrugged. Just working. And what got you so excited? I could feel your presence drawing near, and I couldn't help but get excited. Lies! Hiccup grinned and looked down at his shoe, rubbing the back of his neck. Astrid smirked. Here, let me help you with that. She reached up and ran her fingers along the back of his neck and up into his dark hair. Oh, getting a little hands-on, are we? Always! Astrid whispered, standing on tiptoes to kiss him. Hiccup brushed his fingertips along her cheek and up to her temple, her bangs teasing his fingertips until he felt something at the base of her hairline. It felt like sand? He gently pulled away and pushed her bangs back. Astrid kissed his cheek and began to move to his jawline, but he grudgingly stopped her. Why is there sand in your hair? She suddenly pulled up with a groan. Is there? She tipped her head upside down and rubbed her fingers through the loose parts of her braid. Hiccup gaped as sand fell everywhere, leaving a faint white line on the grass below their feet. I have to wash my hair now. Sounds good to me. Hiccup smiled. I like it when you wash your hair. Astrid raised an eyebrow. Of course you do. Well, I don't know what you wash it with, but by Odin's beard it smells good. Maybe one day I'll share the recipe with you. She winked. Hiccup felt his cheeks warm up again with that look, but he managed to ask, So you didn't answer my question. Why is there sand in your hair? Astrid sighed. Well, a couple of twins decided to let their Zippelback dig a 30-foot hole at the beach, thinking it was a good idea before the walls collapsed. The twins got out okay, but we were digging barf and belch out all afternoon. Hiccup internally winced. I'm sorry. He bent forward and kissed her between the eyes. It would have been more fun if you had been there, she murmured. Sorry, I had stuff to do. What sort of stuff? Super important stuff. Astrid pouted. Why can't I know about it? Because it's special. And I'm not special enough to know about it? She dared. Oh, no, you're the most special. But I'm not the first to know what it is, so how can I be the most special if you didn't tell me first? Hiccup closed his mouth. He didn't know what to say. Was she really this offended? A bell rang in the distance. Astrid looked off toward the village, and Hiccup's heart sank. That was Phlegma's dinner bell telling her daughter and husband to come home soon or she'd eat without them. He didn't want her to leave yet. Astrid sighed and looked back up at him. I just feel like we haven't done anything in a while. We're always so busy with something. She crossed her arms and looked away. Hey! Hiccup smiled a little and placed a few fingers under her chin, raising her face up to his. He bent down and kissed her chastely on the lips. I'll make it up to you soon. We'll do something you'll never forget. Astrid cocked an eyebrow. Promise? Hiccup held her neck in his hands and kissed her again, longer, firmer. With my every breath. Astrid smiled, yet didn't open her eyes, but held his hands on her neck and rested her forehead on his chest. The bell went off again, more earnestly this time, and she exhaled. I gotta go. I'll come to your house later. Okay. Hiccup nodded and let her go. Astrid walked away a few steps before stopping. She turned around, rocked back, and quickly kissed his cheek before sprinting off to the village. Hiccup sighed happily as he watched her run home. With my every breath.